Hello YouTube, this is Derek. I just finished a game just a few minutes ago actually, and I wanted to talk a little bit about not only that game, but also this new genre, I guess you could say, of, it's not even really a genre of video game, it's it's really more of a new art form, and that is the interactive storytelling, game, for lack of a better word. Because Gone Home really epitomizes what that is. And this is a genre and an art form that I actually really like. There are some other games that I've played that are like this, and again, I'm going to continue to use the terms game and played because there really isn't a good other way to put that, but it really doesn't fall into a game in the sense that we're used to. These are our genres, these are our experiences that you don't really have a win-lose scenario. There's not anything that is at stake. There's no really gameplay mechanics other than that you're interacting with the story. So, and I think in some ways, not as much, but from what I understand, visual novels, which is a big genre that's popular in the East, is kind of something like this. But I think, and I've never played one, so I can't really speak to that. I'd like to try one. I think that there is a little bit of a difference because what really makes this kind of game interesting is that you are dealing with a story. And the primary focus of sitting down at your computer or at your console to experience this piece of art is to experience the story. But what makes it unique from, say, reading a book or watching a movie is that part of the story is conveyed to you by the way that you interact with it. And in a lot of these examples, now not so much in the visual novels, but in a lot of these examples there are, your gameplay doesn't necessarily affect the game outcome. It's not something where, depending on choices that you make or anything like that, that you're going to be seeing a different ending or see things play out in a different way. I believe the visual novels do that. And that's kind of, it's almost like a choose your own adventure, but in sort of in a video game context. With these types of games, you're really just going along for the ride. However, part of the way that it conveys that story to you, and part of why the story has the impact that it does, is because you're experiencing it as a participant in the story, and you're interacting. And I think Gone Home, even though I don't think it's quite as good as a lot of places have been talking about, a lot of the press that's been getting, but I do think it really does a good job of kind of being the culmination of this type of gameplay and this type of medium, because the way that Gone Home works, it starts off, I'm not going to give any spoilers at all because that really is the whole point of experiencing it, so don't worry, but it does begin when you are a girl coming home from a trip and you come to this house that your family has just moved into recently, and so you're sort of exploring the house. There's nobody in there that you know of, at least, that that you can see. It's the middle of the night, you're kind of coming in late, and you just wander around the house and you pick up things, you examine things. Almost everything in the game, within reason, at least a lot of things in the game, are things you can pick up. Not everything, but a lot of things you can pick up. You can open doors, open drawers, cabinets, things like that. And a lot of it doesn't have anything in it other than what you'd expect to be in a bathroom cabinet, medicine, towels, that sort of thing. But you can do it. You can interact with it. The way that you start piecing the story together is you see journal entries. Well, I guess I take that back. You actually see notes, you see newspaper clippings, you see all these different things. Certain items will trigger voiceover work, which are these sort of journal entries. One of the first ones, as you walk into the house, you'll see one that will give you this journal entry, and that part of it kind of explains some of the story. And that's really all there is to it. That's really all there is to the game. You just wander around looking at the different things, and you are kind of guided. There's definitely areas you can get to and areas you can, and you find ways to get to the areas that you couldn't before. But it's nothing where there's no puzzles, there's no really, again, there's no way to lose the game. You just keep going and fiddling around with stuff and picking things up and looking at it. And I think it's a game style that really is going to apply to a certain type of person, and other people are just going to completely be baffled by why people would want to interact with anything like this. I really like it. I really think that this is a style of art that I get really excited about. I do think there are better examples that I have played. In some respects, I think that Gone Home is maybe in some ways an evolution of that, or at least it's a step. Because what Gone Home does really well is it really realizes that world pretty well. You go into this home, it takes place in the mid-90s, and it feels like a mid-90s home. There's just a lot of great verisimilitude in that environment where you really feel like this is something that could really be. Where I feel like Gone Home falls a little bit, and where I feel like other games do a better job, is in the motivation for you as a player. Because you go in, and initially when I started walking through the house, I didn't really pick up a lot of stuff. Because in my mind, I'm coming home, it's the middle of the night, I'm just like, hey, everybody, I'm home, is anyone here? And then just kind of going through rooms, seeing if anyone's around. Once I realized there weren't, then I kind of was like, well, started picking things up. But even at that, after a while, I got into sort of the gameplay mentality of, okay, this is a new room, wander around, look, is there anything I can pick up? Is there anything that kind of stands out, scraps of paper? And it started to kind of pull me out of the experience a little bit because it felt forced. It felt like I didn't really have a good, strong reason to be digging through my mom's underwear drawer. I just was, because I was playing a game and wanted to see what would happen. And I feel like that was it's really the biggest fault of the game, and at the same time, it does a lot of things really well. So it's not something where I think the whole experience is lost because of it. It's just that that's the biggest complaint that I have. And it's one thing that kind of strikes me as a little odd that so many people in the press have been giving it Game of the Year and saying all these amazing things, because it's good, and it really does a lot of things well, but that was such a big drawback for me. It kind of took me out of the experience quite a bit and made me not appreciate it as much as I like some of the other games that I'll talk about in this sort of new art form. I hate to call it a genre because it's not really a game genre. You interact with it like a game, but it's not, because there's not, it's not really a game in the sense of win-lose or any kind of challenge. It's an interactive story. What's beautiful about these types of games, though, is these are games that you can't fully appreciate. Like, if this was a book that you were reading, or if this was a movie you're watching, it would not be the same. It would not be the same at all. Even with the exact same story, exact same scenario, exact everything. What makes it an interesting experience, what makes it unique and special, is the fact that you are interacting with it in real time. And you are a part of that, and you are making choices, and again, the choices don't even necessarily affect the final outcome, but they do affect how you're presented with the story. And because of that, you feel more immersed. If this type of medium can do it right, and I think in some ways Gone Home did things right and some things it didn't, it can really have an impact on you and affect you in a much deeper way than simply reading a story would. Not to put down books, I'm a big reader, but it's just different. It's a different type of experience, and it's one that I really love, and I want to see more of this. So I love the fact that Gone Home is getting a lot of good press, because I want to see more games like this. But what I want to see next is something that's going to give me the same kind of well-told story, because Gone Home does have a good story. It's an interesting story. It's a very mature story. That's one of the things I think that's really cool about it, is it's a mature, and not mature as in like boobs and violence, but mature as in these are real emotions, a real family, things that you would be experiencing, things that I'm sure some of my friends experience. In fact, there's a couple of friends that I know I would like to have them play this to see, is this something they can relate to on a different level than I can, just because of where they are in life and things that they've gone through. Because it has a lot of real rich adult storytelling, and that this is something that's, very, I keep using the word real, but that's what it feels like. I mean, it does feel like it tells a story. It tells a story that is mature in the real sense of the word. Again, not M-rated, that kind of mature, but a mature, adult, sensible, intelligent story. And I think it's really exciting. I think what they did there was great. But what I'd like to see is a game that does that, but again, gives me as a player a compelling reason to go on. Just because after a while with this game, because there was no reason, I was trying to figure out what was going on, kind of, but even at that, to some extent, it wasn't, that ended up not becoming the main point of the game. But it just, I don't know, I feel like there could have been something to just draw me on a little bit more. And, it doesn't need to be led around by the nose, but give me some compelling reason. And I was talking about some other games that do this. The first game I played that was kind of in this genre, I would say, was Dear Esther. And Dear Esther is one that, in some ways, has a lot less gameplay than this one does, and also probably in some ways has a less of a anything driving you forward. But Dear Esther was a beautiful game, and it was a beautiful experience because when you are going through that, it was another one where I really felt like, because of the way I was interacting with the environment, that story was told to me in a way that it couldn't have been told any other way. Dear Esther also in some ways is somewhat vague in its story and a little bit open to interpretation, which I like. I thought it was interesting and compelling to keep going forward. It's really more of a pure exploration game because at that one you're just sort of wandering around, and at certain points you'll get a voiceover that it kind of talks about some things that happen on this area where you are. And but as the story goes, it has a really great sense of build-up. And that build-up happens in the story, but it also happens in the gameplay. So some things start happening in there that are kind of strange and weird, but it all forms this really interesting arc in the way that that everything is presented to you. And Gone Home has the story arc, has a really nice story arc, but the gameplay part of that didn't really match up. I don't think it necessarily has to in the same way because they're very different games and very different kind of storylines, but I think that Dear Esther, ultimately, the end was a little bit more of a moving experience for me because of the way that you interact with everything as far as the way the world, the kind of world it creates. Gone Home was a much more realized world, much more realistic, and again, had the verisimilitude that Dear Esther, by design does not. But they're different, but I felt myself a little bit more drawn into Dear Esther. Now, the one game that I think does this in some ways better than any other, at least it has the best story. I mean, by far, this game has one of the best stories. I may even do a My Thoughts video on this game by itself, and that's To the Moon. To the Moon is one of the greatest games I've ever played in my life. It's just, and just because of the story, I think the story is amazing. It's actually, when I played that game, I went out immediately and bought it for my girlfriend. And then just this last Christmas, I bought it for another friend of mine because I'm like, I want everybody to play this game. It's so good. That one doesn't have the same again, it's a game that's built on the RPG Maker engine. So it has that nice 16-bit sort of role-playing game look, which I love, but it in some ways kind of loses the realism that you would get with Gone Home, with it being a more true to life kind of rendition. And so there's a little bit of a difference in that, but it's the same type of thing where you're going along and dealing with just letting the story unfold. And it's also one that I felt had a lot more parts of the story, parts of it that was driving you as a player forward, and also one that could not be told as well in any other medium. I don't know that the story could be told. Well, the story could be told as a movie because the story is brilliant, but I think that, I think if telling that story as a movie would actually detract. It would be a good movie, but it wouldn't be the same experience, and it wouldn't be as good as To the Moon, the game is, because of the way that you interact, that you're a part of that world. So I with Gone Home, as far as whether or not I would recommend it to anybody, I think it comes down to, is this the type of thing, know what you're getting into is really what it comes down to. Know that you're not getting a game that really has any win-lose gameplay. It's very short. It's probably about 2 hours to finish. So it's one of those things you sit down in an evening and play through the entire thing, have that experience. But if you're looking for something different, if you're looking for something in this type of style, this interactive storytelling style, it's a really solid game. I think it's a good one to pick up now because it is getting a lot of press. And some of the people in the press seem to like it more than I did, and I did like it. It wasn't, and sometimes it may have been the hype train. I mean, seeing all these great scores and Game of the Year, maybe that kind of soured me on it. Maybe it just couldn't live up to the hype, and it wasn't the game's fault. And if I had come into it completely blind, I might have had a better experience with it. I don't know. But having said that, there were a lot of really fantastic things in there. And I think it's kind of like everybody else that does a review for this game. It's hard to get into some of the details of what you liked, because it gives away, not necessarily the story, but part of this experience is just going and experiencing it for yourself and seeing that and becoming a part of that world. And so if I tell you what that's like, you may not have the same experience when you go into it. So if you're interested, I really think you should check it out and try to avoid as many spoilers as possible. I tried not to read. I saw that it was Game of the Year for a lot of people, or at least on lists, but I didn't really read any reviews. So it kind of helped me. But I still think that hype train might have clouded my opinion of it a bit. So, but I just want to talk to you about that. So Gone Home, check it out. Possibly, thought it was pretty good. Dear Esther, I would actually recommend probably Gone Home over Dear Esther. I think Gone Home is probably one that, if you've never played a game like this before, would be a better introduction to it. But everybody in the world needs to go out and play To the Moon. So if you have not played that one, get out there, play that game. It's worth every penny you will pay for it. The music is great. The story is great. Everything about that game is wonderful. So absolutely, I'm going to plug To the Moon. So maybe start with that one. Try it out. If that's something that you like, then give Gone Home a whirl and see what you think of a similar kind of aesthetic, but in a different style. All right. Thanks so much for watching. As always, I appreciate it.